Every month, new products come out in the world of FPV, and every month, I round them up for you, giving you my off-the-cuff, unrehearsed, sometimes completely incorrect, but always entertaining and hopefully informative opinion on these new products. I'm being told that I haven't done it in several months. Oh well, it's time to do it now! Let's take a look at the new products that have come out recently in June of 2024. And we're going to start with one of the weirdest and most unique products to come out recently, the Caddx FPV Infra camera. And when you look at this, it looks like it is a digital camera, and this looks an awful lot like a digital video transmitter. That is not what it is. Actually, it took me a while to even figure out what the heck this is, because look here at the listing. It says analog version. This is the analog camera. Well, then what the hell is this box here? The Caddx Infra is, at its heart, a low-light analog camera, and that might make you think of some other low-light cameras you're familiar with, like the Runcam Eagle comes to mind. But this is supposedly, and I don't know, I've ordered one and it hasn't come yet, I'm looking forward to test it, this is supposedly even more sensitive than those, what they call starlight cameras, which can operate in very, very low light, but still need some supplemental light in order to operate. This is being advertised as a no-light night vision analog camera. Does that mean it's like the actual night vision tubes? I don't know. What does a no-light night vision camera even mean? Well, until it comes and people get it in their hands, there's no way to tell for sure. But it's supposed to be an even more sensitive, even better low-light camera. So then what the hell is that little box? Well, it's an AI box. AI image enhancement improves image quality, maximizing blah, blah, blah. Can replace infrared radiation, expanding the, it's, okay. So at the very least, it's marketing. AI is hot right now. They've got this box that is doing something to improve the image. They call it the AI box. Whether it's actually doing artificial intelligence upscaling or whether it's just like sharpening the image, there's no way to know until we've got one in our hands, and maybe not even then. But at least one thing that makes this camera different due to the AI box is that it works with both analog systems, or you can buy it in an HD version that outputs a signal that works with a walk-snail digital video transmitter. So here is a camera that's actually usable with both, although as you can see, the HD version is out of stock. I've got so many questions about this camera. Like, first of all, is it actually better in low light environments than something like the Runcam Night Eagle? Well, that's going to be easy to test. How much latency is this AI processor adding? And what the hell is the AI processor anyway? And how are you going to fit this damn thing on your quad? This box is in addition to your video transmitter. So yeah, it's going to be a struggle to get this on a typical 5-inch. I guess on a 7-inch, it's probably going to be pretty easy. All of these questions will be answered when I get one and review it. But for now, if you're looking for a low light camera, then the Caddx FPV Infra seems like it should at least be on your radar. Before we go on, did you notice how long this freaking video is? If you're happy about how long the video is, by all means, just keep watching it. But if you want to skip to a specific product, there are links in the video description below with timestamps and chapter markers, as well as chapter markers in the timeline. So if you just want to go down there, scroll around, look for a particular product that interests you, by all means, go ahead and do it. In addition, there are product links down below, and it's really helpful when you use those. Those are affiliate links, and when you click that link and then make any purchase at the affiliated vendor, I get a little commission. So as long as you're doing shopping anyway, just go click one of my affiliate links. It's an easy way for you to say thanks for the work I'm doing here. Doesn't cost you anything. Next, we're going to take a look at some tiny whoop related stuff. And we're going to start with this new set of motors from WeBleedFPV. These are the 0702 size 40,000 kV skirt. I cannot channel my internal Cardi B and figure out how to actually say skirt. Caw! Basically, this is the newest, highest kV version of the WeBleedFPV 0702 motor. There was a time when like 15,000 kV was like the standard for 65mm 1S tiny whoops. And then they started making a couple like 19 to 21,000 kV ones. And I remember when that came out, I was like, oh, it's so high kV. What's it mean? And that trend has clearly continued. Way, way, way better pilots than me have settled on like 27,000, 28,000, 30,000 kV, maybe even higher as being desirable. I got to say, though, I think you should be real careful if you're just a typical pilot and you're trying to like get better performance, because these high kV motors come with a price, and that is they can be really hard on your battery, especially if your drone is not ultra lightweight. When I put like 35,000, I think maybe 32,000 kV motors on one of my HD0 tiny whoop, my flight time went way down, and I don't think I was actually that much faster. So if you're the kind of guy who is looking for the absolute cutting edge of high kV tiny whoop racing, 40,000 kV is the highest I've ever even seen, and these motors are linked down below. But if you're more a typical person, maybe something in the 25,000, 27,000 kV even, maybe even less than that, would be better for you. How do you remove the props from your tiny whoop motors? If you're like most people, you pinch the motor and you twist the prop and you pull and eventually it pops off. But a lot of people struggle with this. Maybe you don't have the hand strength or dexterity to kind of get in there and pinch. Or in some cases, when you're pulling, you'll actually just like rip the bell off. It'll just separate from the shaft. So somebody invented a tool that goes in between the prop and the motor bell and pushes the prop off without stressing the motor or without stressing your fingers. And I believe the first, I don't know if it was the first, okay, I won't say that, but one of the first ones that I really saw come to prominence was this prop popper by inventor WeBleedFPV. I also heard a lot of drama about it being out of stock all the time, although at the moment, nope, sold out, in stock, sold out. Oh, some of them are in stock, but not all. If you're interested in picking one of those up, you can pick it up from Tiny Whoop, which is where I first heard about it. In addition, WeBleedFPV has also made one, which is better. Let's see if we can compare them. Like, can we learn anything about this? Like, the WinSyn FPV one doesn't appear to be spring-loaded. Oh, the WeBleed one seems to have injection molded parts, whereas the Tiny Whoop one seems to have 3D printed parts. I don't know if that matters. Anyway, either of them are good, and if you are, $30 versus $20. Well, that's a big difference too. Anyway, if you're interested in removing your Tiny Whoop props easier and with less chance of damage to your motors, then this is a tool for you. Here's a new development in the world of Tiny Whoop charging, and I don't mean 1S Tiny Whoop charging, I mean 2S. VIFly invented the VIFly ToothStor, which is a 6-channel 1S charger, and I think it's one of the best ways to charge 1S Tiny Whoop batteries. Well, if you've got 2S batteries, you can now get the VIFly ToothStor, and basically it's a 2S version of the VIFly ToothStor. Now, it's only got 4 channels instead of 6 channels, so it only charges 4 batteries at a time. Don't let the fact that it has 8 plugs fool you. These 2 plugs are in parallel with each other. You can either charge with the balance plug on your 2S battery, or if we scroll down, you can see there's a new connector from BetaFPV, the BT 3.0 connector, which is basically a 2S connector with a built-in balance plug, and this also supports that. It's got all the other things I like about the VIFly ToothStor, including flexible power input from XT60, DC or USB power delivery. You can do it from a power bank, and relatively fast charging, although maybe not as fast as if you were using a bigger charger, but whether that'll work for you or not depends on how big your 2S batteries are. Yeah, you can see here the max charging is 1.5 amps per port. So if that's going to be fast enough to charge your batteries up, then this may be a great charger for you. Next, we're going to take a look at a new Tiny Whoop, and that'll be our opportunity to transition from talking about Tiny Whoops to talking about bind and flies. And the Tiny Whoop we're going to talk about is the Happymodel Mobula6 2024 edition. I actually got one of these. Thank you, Happymodel. They actually sent it to me for use in the Race Gal competition, a Tiny Whoop racing competition that I participated in, and I really, really liked how it flew. The Mobula6 has been just the go-to for people who say, hey, I want a tiny whoop, what should I get? But it hasn't always been the highest performance. And in this case, there definitely will be people out there who say it's still not the highest performance. They want those 40,000 kV motors, but like I said, that's a lot for a lot of people. You can see with the 2024 version of the Mobula6, they've taken a lot of steps to cut down the weight. The new canopy design, I actually really was impressed with this canopy design because by changing the screw hole here on this back tab, you can actually easily change the up tilt angle, but the canopy is super light. It's not as protective as it could be, but you know, the idea here is we're saving weight and we are improving performance. The motors are no slouch either. They are 0702 28,000 kV, and that's just about perfect for a tiny whoop of this weight and a sort of a typical user, not somebody trying to just squeeze the absolute most speed at the expense of flight time. You are going to want to make sure you have good batteries. The battery connector on this is the GNB A30 connector, but don't worry, you don't have to buy A30 batteries. You can also buy batteries with a BT 2.0 connector on them, and those are, they fit, they work perfectly well. That's good because the BT 2.0 connector is going to have less voltage loss than the PH 2.0 connector that used to come on the Mobula6. If you're looking for good batteries, I have a video where I talked about the very, very best tiny whoop batteries you can get, and I'll put a link to that in the video description below. The next quadcopter we're going to look at is the BetaFPV Aquila 1.6. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. It is a 1.6 inch analog whoop, but what makes it different is that it's trying to be more integrated. We saw something like this with the, I think it was the iFlight, was it the Defender? We saw something like this with the iFlight Defender where they tried to have like an integrated battery with an integrated plug and tried to make it a little bit more of a seamless experience. Now BetaFPV is moving the same direction. Like the Defender, the Aquila has a modular battery design that just snaps on. We can see the little clips here. So the intent would be that you would use it with the BetaFPV batteries that are made specifically for this quadcopter. Most likely you could use it with third-party batteries if you have them, but that's not the idea behind it. But the modular battery is not the only thing BetaFPV has done to try to make this easier to fly. They've given it several flight modes, including normal mode, where it has altitude hold, and it's not just barometer-based, or at least it suggests it's not just barometer-based. It suggests it's using an optical flow sensor to give position hold similar to a DJI drone. And that optical flow sensor presumably also has a sonar, they often do, that will let it do altitude. You can see here that it's shown flying over an obstacle and maintaining height above ground, not just height in the air, which is what a barometer would do. This is all very like marketing-tastic, and how well it works in real life obviously remains to be seen, but it's very intriguing that BetaFPV is moving this direction. Here's another thing they've done that you don't normally see on FPV drones. They have speed ratings. 1.25 meters per second, 3.33 meters per second, and 5 meters per second. And if they actually are measuring speed, like, do they have a GPS in there? Do they have some way of measuring speed? Or are they just estimating the speed based on the tilt angle that they allow you to go to? I'm not sure, but these are very specific numbers. I'm kind of surprised, and it suggests maybe they're doing some kind of speed control, again, similar to a DJI drone. I don't know, but I'm really intrigued by this. I'm so conflicted every time I see something like this because this is really novel. There are very few like bind and fly FPV drones that have tried to do something like this. I can't think of another FPV drone that comes from the manufacturer with an optical flow sensor on it. Obviously, DJI does. Obviously, camera drones do, but FPV drones, no. I always go back, though, to BetaFPV sometimes tends to cut corners in the actual production of their drones. Like, for example, notice here they list 200 meters flight distance with the goggles that come with it. So that's not very far. And that's like probably best case. So like what video transmitter is in here? Like how good are these goggles? And as always, how is it going to hold up when you start crashing it? These things remain to be seen. And again, we'll know when I review it because I asked BetaFPV if they'd send one for review. And I'm really intrigued to see what it comes. It's not even that expensive. Look, $140. Now that's for the drone only, not the bind and fly kit. The bind and fly kit is $250. In this day and age, that's, I mean, if it's half decent, that's not a bad price. Here is the Caddx GoFilm 2.0. This is a 2-inch quadcopter with the Caddx Moonlight built in. And in case you missed my review of it, the Caddx Moonlight is a walk-snail slash Caddx slash avatar. The branding here is so confusing. It's a walk-snail compatible video transmitter that has onboard 4K recording and a camera that's suited for 4K recording. The idea is that the Moonlight competes with the DJI-03, which can also do high-quality onboard recording, and the theory is that if you're running this camera, you're not going to need to run a GoPro or any other high-definition camera to get good quality results. In my experience, the Caddx Moonlight didn't have quite as good image quality as the DJI-03. It was a little bit sharper, but overall, I preferred the 03, the way it handled the colors, but it wasn't terrible, and it's going to be more than enough for a lot of people. I know this for a fact because I see people talking about it on Facebook and saying that they think it's pretty great. The main drawback of the Moonlight, though, was that when you activate image stabilization, the lens zooms way in, and the DJI-03 handles this by having an ultra wide angle lens so that when you activate stabilization, or if you use gyroflow in post, when you crop in, you still have a pretty good field of view. I thought that the Moonlight had a lot less ability to run stabilization, which is something that cinematic people are going to want to do. I thought it had a lot less ability, and I wish they'd put a wider angle lens on it. Nevertheless, here is a bind and fly with the Caddx Moonlight pre-installed and ready to go for those of you looking for a walk-snail compatible Cinewhoop that can do onboard 4K recording. Next, let's take a look at the GEPRC Tern LR40. And the GEPRC Tern is a new entry in the 4-inch long range category. And a lot of people, when they hear 4-inch long range, they think, well, isn't long range more the domain of like 7 inches, 8 inches, 10 inches, big props for big drones that carry big batteries and fly for a long time? But it turns out there's multiple ways to get long flight time. As long as you have a relatively light weight, you can extend that flight time. This category was first popularized by the Flywoo Explorer, and we got to give credit where credit's due for coming up with that category. GEPRC Tern has some differences from the Flywoo Explorer. It's built a little bit more sturdy, although it still claims it can get, it says 16-minute flight time. The GEPRC Tern here on the left is a little heavier than the Flywoo Explorer here on the right. The Explorer comes in around 160 grams dry. The Tern comes in around 180 grams dry. Both of them, by the way, come in under 250 grams, at least with the right battery. Although you're not going to get the longest possible flight time in that 250 gram configuration. I really like some of the changes that GEPRC has made with the Taker. You can see that the Flywoo Explorer is really trying to be as lightweight as possible and doesn't have a ton of focus on durability. It's not that it's ultra fragile, but if you crash it, it is somewhat more likely that it's going to break due to its thin arms. Now, obviously, I haven't flown the GEPRC Tern, so I can't comment too much on its durability. It does seem like it's a little beefier, though, than the Flywoo Explorer. It's got a metal front end, for example. Whether that's going to result in more durability or just transmit more shock into the frame, and because of the additional weight, cause it to break easier, is hard to say. I do like that the GEPRC Tern is finally, so many quadcopters don't bother to put the GPS in the ideal location. Having the GPS unit here off the back, right next to the video transmitter, and depending on the mounting, also next to the receiver antenna, can compromise the ability to get GPS satellite lock. Having the GPS mounted up high like this is a pretty standard for long-range drones, and it's nice to see GEPRC doing it. Here's something I never thought I would see. A long, long time ago, the owner of RaceDayQuads, Tyler Brennan, had a little bit of an argument with the owner of TBS, Raphael Perker, also known as Trappy. And it's not time for us to dig up old skeletons by going into the details of that disagreement. But both of them are extremely, I'm just going to say, stubborn people. Both of them decided they didn't like each other. And they never resolved that difference. In fact, to this day, I'm not sure that they have. And Trappy refused to sell Crossfire stuff wholesale to RaceDayQuads. And what that meant was that for basically all of RaceDayQuads' existence, they didn't have Crossfire stuff in their inventory. And now they do. And I'm pretty sure the reason for that is that RaceDayQuads sold to GetFPV in the last 2 months or so. And now GetFPV, you see a whole bunch of, like, look, Lumineer. There's a whole bunch of GetFPV inventory now in the RaceDayQuads store. They basically merged their inventory. And RaceDayQuads has Crossfire stuff now. What won't times bring us next? Well, FatShark have done it again. They've given us a new FPV goggle that, shocker, looks exactly like an FPV goggle they've released several years ago and is, I can't even 100% understand what the differences are, other than the fact that it's got a new name. It's the FatShark Echo FPV goggle. This is very similar to the FatShark Scout. There are a few differences in the button placement, and I'm not sure if the specs are different. I don't know, but hey, it's a FatShark FPV goggle. It's an analog goggle, by the way, analog. It's an analog FPV goggle from FatShark for $100. And the competition to this is basically the Eachine EV800DM. Let's compare them. The Eachine 900 by 600 resolution. This is WQVGA. A little slightly lower resolution. Fine. Antenna port, but sometimes there's a patch antenna internal. Don't see any reference to that, so no diversity. Field of view, 55 degrees. What's the field of view on these? Doesn't say. I'm going to guess, just based on the size of the goggles, EV800 is not the 800DM. I don't know. I'm going to guess based on the size of the goggles that the FatShark's is a little bigger, but that's pure speculation. FatShark makes good stuff. They make good hardware. They're not the most innovative, but the quality of their hardware is usually quite high. The performance is not always the best. For $100 though, I might pick the Echo over the Eachine. Yeah, it's at least worth a look. Next, we're going to take a look at flight controllers and ESCs. And I've actually got a list of 3 or 4 really inexpensive flight controller and ESC stacks that I want to show you. But before we get to that, here is the T-Motor Velox F7. Now, it's not super budget. It's about $65, $70 for the flight controller alone. But it's got some interesting features. It's got Bluetooth on board. The Bluetooth modem is soldered in instead of just being integrated, which is kind of interesting. And it claims to have the BetaFlight latest wiring standard with unified socket standards. No longer worry about plugging in the wrong wire. And here's even a BetaFlight logo. I have no idea what the hell this means. Like, in the world of ArduPilot, there's a standard for how the plugs work so that all ArduPilot flight controllers have the same plugs. At least that's my understanding for how it works. Sorry if I got that wrong. But nobody's ever done that for BetaFlight. The plugs on BetaFlight flight controllers are just whatever the manufacturer decided. So, is this a T-Motor standard? At which point it's not that useful because it's not universal. If you can't buy peripherals that have these standard plugs already on them, then the standard isn't that meaningful. I just thought it was hilarious when I saw this and thought I would, maybe you can explain to me what the hell this means. But for me, it just seems a little silly. Next up, we've got 2 inexpensive ESC and flight controller stacks. And in this day and age, inexpensive means about $60 or $70 for the flight controller and ESC. That used to be expensive, but that's the world we live in. The first one is from AxisFlying, the AxisFlying Eco. It's an F405 processor, a 30 by 30 stack with a 32-bit, so it's BLHeli32 ESC. That's nice. ESC rated for 60 amps, and it costs $69. The second one is the GEPRC Taker, which is also F405. It's got a 50 amp ESC, so a little bit lower amp rating than the AxisFlying, although what that means, practically speaking, is hard to say. And it only has a BLHeli-S ESC, not a BLHeli32 ESC. So in order to get functionality like bidirectional D-Shot, you will need to flash BlueJay to that ESC. I've got a video about how to do that. I'll put a link in the video description if you don't already know how to do it. The advantage of the GEPRC Taker is that it is only $60, whereas the AxisFlying Eco is about $10 more. Here's another inexpensive flight controller and ESC stack, the Foxeer F405 Reaper. And I sound a little confused here because, like, normally when I think of Foxeer Reaper, I think of this, the Foxeer Reaper ESC, which is $85 all by itself. Foxeer Reaper is known among racers as one of the most durable and best performing ESCs. It's one of the top ESCs used by top racers, and the price reflects that. So what's the difference here? I'm honestly not that sure. We've got the F405 processor, which is the faster of the two. It's the F411 that's the slow one. I only remember that because the F411 is the higher number, so normally I think it's the better one, but then I have to remember that it's backwards. I mean, presumably the ESC is not as well performing. 128K PWM, 32-bit, 65 amp, 8S rated, but honestly, you're not giving up that much. This is a 55 amp rated ESC, and it's also 8S rated. Geez, you could even do an 8S build with one of these. This certainly seems like it offers a lot of capabilities for the price. So I don't know anything about this one specifically, but it seems like a strong contender. Our next flight controller is not exactly inexpensive. In fact, it's hella expensive, $132 for the flight controller and the ESC. And what makes it unique is that it is, well, weatherproof. The DarwinFPV Cement stack covers the electronics on both the flight controller and the ESC with these metal shields. And the idea is that it makes them completely waterproof. I don't know how that works with heat dissipation on the ESC. Presumably there is heat transfer thermal paste or something between the ESC FETs and the external metal cover so that it can still dissipate heat. As far as performance goes, they've got all the things you could ask for. There's an F4 processor on the ESC, so it can go up to 128K PWM, although many people use lower PWM frequencies because it gives better torque and responsiveness, so that may not be a plus for you, but it's not cutting any corners, that's for sure. Since it's weatherproof, how are you going to do black box logging? Well, you obviously can't do an SD card because that would require a slot. And normally you would see like a 256 meg data or 512 meg data flash chip that holds a few minutes of flight at most. No, DarwinFPV has gone above and beyond with a 4 gig black box storage built into the flight controller. No SD card or anything like that. It's just built in and it can record much, much longer. I think the big question with something like the DarwinFPV Cement is it worth it? And what I mean by that is all of your FPV hardware is destined to die. You're going to crash and you're going to destroy it. Some people faster than others, depending on how and where you fly. And so the question is water going to be the thing that destroys it before you smashing into the wall destroys it? And if the answer for you is yes, water is going to be the thing I'm worried about, like if you fly a lot during the winter and there's snow on the ground, or if you regularly fly over fresh water, then something like this could make sense. I think it's worth pointing out that although this will probably help, if you're planning on crashing into salt water, you're pretty much going to lose the drone. I mean, there's just so much damage that salt water does so fast that even though these parts may be protected, other parts are going to be damaged. We've got one motor in this month's Roundup, and a lot of times I'm not super excited about new motors, but this one definitely has something different. It's the RC & Power AOS Supernova 2807. This is the 2807 version of Chris Rosser's Supernova 2207 motor. And basically what he's done is he's made a motor that has like 10 or 15% more volume than other motors of the same weight. Basically, his 2207 motor is actually not really a 2207. It's a little bit bigger than that, but he's found ways to optimize the design of the motor and the weight of the motor so that it has the same weight as a typical 2207 motor, about 33 grams. So the idea is that you get the performance of a bigger motor without the weight penalty. And presumably, he's done the same thing here with the 2807. He's applied the same design principles that he put into the 5-inch motor, and now we've got basically a 7-inch class motor. You have to keep in mind as you look at these numbers that Chris reports: 25% more torque, 11% better responsiveness, 9% higher thrust to weight ratio. I think you have to keep in mind that those numbers are real. Like, he measured those numbers, and I presume that he measured them accurately. He's not like putting his finger on the scale. I think he's got enough integrity not to do that. But you have to keep in mind that he's comparing these to motors in the same weight class. So he's saying this is a 2807 motor and it weighs X number of grams. How much does it weigh? 47 grams. He's taken other popular 2807 motors that also weigh 47 grams and he's compared them to that. But if you were to actually get more motors of the actual size that this motor is, and I don't know what that is, but let's say instead of 2807, it's actually 28.5 by 08. Okay, if you were to get other motors in that size, they probably would perform pretty similarly. They just would be heavier. So if you're looking at the price of this motor and going, well, that's a bit much for me, you may be able to get similar performance with less money and with just a little bit of weight penalty. How much weight penalty? I'm not sure. I don't actually know the actual size of this motor, so I don't really know what you would compare it to. Next, I want to look at these ExpressLRS receivers from iFlight, and there's something unique about these receivers that I haven't seen before in an ExpressLRS receiver. You see, you probably think that the receiver's job is to receive signals from the hand controller and communicate them to the flight controller, and that's true. But the receiver also transmits telemetry back to the hand controller. And for many pilots, that telemetry data isn't critical. It's nice to have, but not critical during flight, especially if you're getting that information from the on-screen display in your goggles. But for long-range pilots, they often like to have a bidirectional data link between the hand controller or a ground station laptop or something like that, and the quadcopter. For them, telemetry can be more important. And it turns out that the transmit power of the telemetry on many receivers is not that high. It might only be 50 or 100 milliwatts. So if you've got a hand controller that's blasting out 1 watt, but your receiver's telemetry is only 100 milliwatts, you can see that the range of those two is not going to be the same. And a lot of times you'll lose telemetry while you still have control, and that bidirectional link will be broken. Enter these high output power receivers. This 500 milliwatts that you see here is the transmit power of the telemetry in the receiver. And that means that the range of your upstream telemetry link is going to be closer to, or maybe even equal to, the range of your downstream control link. There's 2 of these receivers here. One is the 500 milliwatt version for $22, and one is the 250 milliwatt version for, nope. Okay, that's weird. I swear I saw a 250 milliwatt one as well. Oh well, I guess I was wrong. That's fine, because I'm also a fan of iFlight's ExpressLRS receivers for people who don't need that 500 milliwatt uplink. Here we've got a $17 receiver. They're just well built. You can see they've even got an FCC ID, which a lot of manufacturers don't go to the trouble to certify with the FCC. iFlight's trying to do it all above board. But even if you don't care about that, I really like that they come with a plug and they come with a pre-pinned wire. If you decided that you only wanted to buy iFlight ExpressLRS receivers, you could put this plug harness on your flight controller and you could easily swap the receiver without having to resolder anything. That's kind of cool. We can even see that this receiver has a temperature compensated oscillator, which helps keep the signal stable as the temperature heats up and cools down. If you want buttery, smooth cinematic footage, then you need an ND filter for your high definition camera. And Camera Butter makes some of the best ND filters for GoPros on FPV quadcopters. But there is a downside to all ND filters, but including Camera Butters, and that is how fragile they are. They're made of glass because you want good optical quality. And then as you crash, they just break really easily. And they're not cheap. They're like $8 or $10 a piece. So what are you going to do? Well, Camera Butter has responded with the Black Diamond ND filters, which are they made from Gorilla Glass? They're tougher. They break less easy. They're harder to break. It doesn't say, they are. They're made from ultra-strong Corning Gorilla Glass. I thought they were, but I wasn't sure. So they're made from Gorilla Glass, so they'll still break. I mean, everything breaks, but they won't break quite as easily. In addition, they've put a CNC aluminum frame around the filters, which, like, normally they would have just a little sticky gasket and you'd stick them on and it'd be really easy to break them. This makes them just a little bit stronger. Of course, they're also a little bit more expensive, but hopefully the durability makes up for the difference in price. They've also got the Camera Butter Twist-On Shock Mod, which is a protective lens for GoPro Hero 9, 10, 11, 11 Mini, and Hero Bones, and 12. Does it have an ND filter too? Just twists on the front there and replaces the front lens housing. Oh, I see. This replaces the front lens housing and has just this little poke out here that protects the lens. And then you stick the ND filter on the front, so it works even better together. Here's something that's pretty cool, although it's not going to seem cool when you first see it. This is electronic goop. And here's what it is. You use this electronic goop to hold things that you're trying to solder. Can we find a better example? Yeah, here we go. Here's better examples. Here we're holding this thing down. Here we're holding this thing. We're holding these wires. And the idea is that, especially when you're out in the field, you might not have like a third hand to hold what you need. You just take this goop, you stick it on something, you stick the wire in it, you solder it up, and you're good to go. Now, in the past, I have used blue tack putty. Oh, here it is right here. I have some right next to me. Blue tack, and it's good. It's the exact same thing, but it's not very heat resistant. If this gets hot enough, it gets super soft, and it can actually melt, and it can stick to your electronics and make a big mess. So the idea is that this electronic goop is basically functionally the same, but it takes heat better. It doesn't get all soft and gooey and doesn't stick to things. Very cool. Just a reminder before we wrap up that it means a lot to me if you go down and click the links in the video description below. Those are affiliate links, and long story short, you click link, you buy anything at the store, I get money. It's a very easy way for you to support the work that I'm doing here. Hope you've enjoyed this one. And if you've got any products you think I missed or products you'd like to suggest for the next one, please email me, jb@joshuabardwell.com, or just leave a comment below. I'll see you in the next one.